Preparing to live stream, setting up the webinar, and there we go. Perfect. We are live. Good,
Fantastic.
right? Good afternoon, Aspires. My name is Alejandro Obanez. I'm your temporary host in residence here at Minorities in Cybersecurity and the alumni director. I would like to say thank you for joining us this afternoon. I know it's Friday somewhere in the world and we're all having a great time. I am joined today with our lovely Ted Sanders, who attended a Minorities in Cybersecurity conference. He is an overall renowned cybersecurity professional with a strong past in compliance and GRC, and a great guy to talk to and talk security with. He has tons of
Yeah.
experience, and he is. I'm gonna insert a weird fact. I'm gonna make it up real quick, but I'm gonna assume that he's a grill master extraordinaire and can throw down some
I am.
barbecue. So
Yeah.
I'm glad I was right. Ted, do you want to introduce yourself and say anything else or anything to add on that?
Yeah. Thank you, Alejandro, and greetings to the whole community of aspires. As Alejandro said, I've been in cybersecurity for quite a while, actually a total of 28 years, either in IT or cyber, and really grateful to be here. A little bit about me: I have a master's in cybersecurity from the University of Dallas, certified information security professional. And also serve in the capacity as a business information security officer at Bank of America. And one of the things I love about this program is the opportunity to engage and have conversations with practitioners, right? People that are actually boots on the ground in the profession. And so I'm really grateful to Mary and the rest of the team here for being able to participate and create opportunities for you guys to learn. So yeah, glad to be here.
We love having you, Ted. Um, so the Spires program is mostly geared towards younger, not younger, sorry, greener applicants, as well as folks who are entering cybersecurity. I wanted to ask, since your time as a web developer, what first got you interested in cyber?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I started my career in web application development and kind of fell into cyber a little bit on accident. And this is a story I tell mentees and other people that I sort of guide in terms of career development. Sometimes your path into cyber comes in a very mysterious way. I was working in IT operations, so after I did web development for a while. I actually ended up working as an IT director and kind of more on the infrastructure side, working on deploying networks, Linux servers, Windows servers, and then moved up into management, sort of managing the teams that kind of deliver IT services. And when I relocated to Dallas, I came to the Dallas area for graduate school. I was actually in the interest of pursuing either a master's in IT service management, IT service delivery, or in cybersecurity. And I actually fell into cyber through healthcare. I took a job in healthcare as an IT director. And I walked in the first week on the job, and the privacy director in the clinic told me, "Hey, we have all these HIPAA challenges." And at the time, I knew what HIPAA was, but I didn't know the extent of how it impacted privacy and security. And subsequently, I didn't know all the details, but I started reading up right away, and I realized, oh, I just basically found my way into a security role. Because if you know anything about HIPAA, the HIPAA security rule has a whole list of controls that need to be implemented in healthcare environments. And also, those
Yo,
controls have to cascade to covered entities or third parties. And so, needless to say, it was a blessing in disguise because I was able to learn a lot about the role that our infrastructure controls and other types of administrative controls play in maintaining the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data. And that was really kind of my baptism into that space. By the time I was done with that, I had already achieved my CISSP, and that really kind of pushed me on the path into cybersecurity. So the lesson there is don't be afraid to take a challenge. You never know, it might be a gateway to a whole new dimension in your career growth.
oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, especially dealing with HIPAA. I don't envy you there, Ted. That was HIPAA being your
Yeah,
first challenge in the cyber,
that's
especially for
right.
GRC folk. That is you just said let's go for gold. Let's
Let's go
say
for gold. Just dive in. That's
Cool.
right. Yeah.
Oh, since you said that you mentor and you are a BSO at Bank of America, I guess for
Mhm.
advice and engagement level, what do you look for when mentoring folks or hiring junior cybersecurity professionals?
Yeah, great question. So a couple of things I kind of look for. Number one is a passion for the work, right? Even if you're still working on your certifications or taking classes, I look for a level of energy and interest in the work. I'll tell you this, you have to be a person who loves puzzles and loves solving problems. And so I look for that kind of signature in when people tell me their story, their origin story, or their career journey. The other thing that I look for a lot, Alejandro, is intellectual curiosity. Because the space that we operate in is ever changing and ever evolving, we're continuous learners in this space. And so you've got to have this insatiable appetite to learn more because every day there are new challenges that we're facing, but also there's always new technology. In my opinion, technology is evolving faster, right, in this season than it really has in the last 25 to 30 years. Just the pace of evolution. We're talking about AI and how AI is transforming the technological landscape. You really just have to have an insatiable appetite and the curiosity to dig in and dig into new topics, dig into new technology. Those are the things that I typically look for.
I love that. Out of those skills or out of anything you may have mentioned, or maybe it's things you may have not mentioned, if
Mhm.
you were looking for someone to replace yourself, what's a skill do you think they'd need?
Well, that's an interesting question. Let me first say I have no plans on going anywhere anytime soon. But
Of course not. No.
no, but no, in all seriousness, all jokes aside, you know, that's a great question. And I think I'm going to try to phrase my answer for the Aspire audience. In my role is a very unique role. I'm a horizontal leader, so I have both the technical acumen, but also the ability to influence leaders. And so that's one of the things that I look for, both when I'm looking for people to add to the team, but also if I were thinking about continuity and continuation of the work. Because one of the things that a CISO or a BISO is tasked to do is they represent the security priorities to the business, right? They have to articulate that, they have to convey that message. They also have to be very consistent and in many ways persistent in driving the outcomes. So literally taking the security objectives and not just managing the security function, right, the operational function, but also reaching across to the other executives and pushing that agenda, right, selling that agenda. So I would say beyond the technical aptitude, the business acumen and the ability to lead horizontally, right? To lead when you don't necessarily even have the checkbook, right? To create enough of a relationship with your partners and your peers that you're able to demonstrate the value of a security project or program and do it in a way that resonates with them, that gets them on board, and in some cases gets them to a point where they begin to co-champion the work. And that's definitely one of the things that I look for.
I agree with that. And I know our aspirers know this from Mary and myself saying it to folks. You don't need a position to be a leader.
That's
It's always,
right.
yeah.
Yep.
We try to
Yep.
co-sign that every opportunity we get. It's you always want to derive influence from your position wherever you're at in the work.
That's right. Yep.
Um, I hope we're not moving too fast either, too. Let me know.
No, we're good.
Perfect. I'll say I want to touch back on your mindset and kind of decision making. You said you kind of gave us kind of like what you look for with your early mindset, having that interest, that puzzle solver.
Hmm.
Um, when you approach high stakes security challenges, and the answer is not like super relevant, super clear to you, what's your usual framework for like attacking a cybersecurity challenge, especially as a horizontal leader where you have like you see the 10,000 foot view of the sandbox as the org, especially with an org such as Bank of America, like what's your first methodology to approach a situation?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's something that I will tell you there are several approaches that I use. And then we have to deal with this all the time as security practitioners, right? Especially we talk about 0 days, vulnerabilities or novel threats that we haven't seen before. Oftentimes we're asked to do analysis on the fly, right? And so there's really a couple of ways of thinking about it. If it's a topic that's related to an existing function or program that we have a lot of documentation and knowledge around, typically, we kind of go through sort of a regression type of view, right? Think of more of like if you think of from a help desk perspective, a root cause analysis to say, okay, what are the facts, right? The user, opened their email, they clicked here, they went this, link, open a web browser. So it's sort of like, taking all the available knowledge, right? Organizing that knowledge into kind of a sequential pattern, right? So, okay, this happened first, second, third, right? And then looking for the specific either decision points or or items within the data that show, okay, well, this was a critical moment, right, or critical path, right? Maybe the threat actor, because of the link that was clicked on, right, it opened up, a file, and then that file called out to a C2 server, and the threat actor said, this person just clicked on this link, now have access, right? And so a lot of that is really kind of, that regression-based view. You take all the information that you have available, you lay that out on timeline, and then you kind of go through that pattern and look for either the specific events that are kind of milestone events or watershed events, and then what were the triggers or what were the causes for that. And so that's one approach, and I think that worked well also for incident response and forensics, right? So thinking, like a forensic analyst, sort of a kill chain type view of how we approach that topic. But I think there's another part of this that's more so from like the business strategy standpoint. I think that's where things get interesting, and that's sort of taking a more business centric view, specifically related to either processes that the business relies upon and looking at things from a criticality standpoint. And so that's less of a reactive type analysis. That's more of a proactive type analysis, and that's useful in a couple of aspects, right? If you are a security leader and you are prioritizing your security investments, right? Maybe you also are informed by a threat forecast, right? So looking at things like the Verizon breach report and trends there, and saying, okay, where are threat actors attacking my industry? How do I prioritize or deprioritize my spend? Right. So those are the types of skills that we typically employ for those type of problems. So to sum it up, there's different layers because there's different
Oh,
types of problems that a security practitioner, especially at my level, has to deal with. And it ranges from things that are very tactical and very reactive to things that are much more forward looking and strategic in nature. And the beauty of being a CISO or a BISO or a deputy CISO is you have to seamlessly move between those worlds and kind of bring different approaches to problem solving to each one of those worlds. So hopefully that provides some insight.
no, I think they did great, and I want to emphasize to our students is that Ted does this via metrics on
That's right.
influencing his deprioritization of spend and reprioritization of spend, and you can't make those decision factors without metrics.
That's right. Data driven
That's
decision making.
yep, data-driven decision making. There's my plug for Mary. I
Yep, there you
use
go.
three of them per session, and I'll relate it back to curriculum. Um, okay, Ted, I want to switch us into more of a little talk shop and more of a barbecue style approach. I'm gonna say all our students are going to be very curious with someone like you that has about four certifications. You have your CISSP, your CRIC, and your CCSP. And
Mhm.
that in itself is a journey in itself. Many
Yes.
students right out the gate when I grab their CISSP. What are your thoughts on gaining certifications such as the CISSP and CCSP from there, especially
Yeah.
for entry-level career folks in the market?
Yeah. That's such a great question. And it's one that I field a lot. And so I'll tell you my journey, and I'll give you some tips on how to make the decision for you, because I never want to provide a guidance that says, "Hey, this is the only way to do it," right?
Hmm.
Because I have industry peers that got their CSSP very early on in their career, and others that waited right until much
Right.
later. And so here's my journey, right? First and foremost, I saw certifications as a validation of earned experience. Okay. And even as a hiring manager, that's typically how I evaluate resumes. And so what does that mean? In the practical sense, if you are a person who has only had 2 years in cybersecurity and you have a million certifications, I'll say, okay, great. You may be a fantastic test taker, right? And but the role that I need you for, I need to also have some demonstrative, right, examples, right, of you having hands-on experience. Because, memorizing a CPK or going to a boot camp and, regurgitating answers, right, that's okay. That's a very academic pursuit. But this security world that we live in and the types of jobs that we're doing, they are applied technology jobs, right? And so even for me, it's one of the reasons that in my academic pursuits and my role as an adjunct instructor, I intentionally wanted to teach in an applied cybersecurity bachelor's program, because I see a lot of students who sort of think, hey, I can just have a turnkey role just because I have the certification, right? And so we don't want to create what we call in the industry paper tigers, right? We want people that have a level of competency. And so my journey was always around I achieved certain technical objectives or career objectives in my job, and then I go out and test against those, right? So, perfect example, when I started in healthcare, my first certification, actually, my first two certifications were the SSCP, which was very much focused on like incident response and technical controls, and the HCISPP, which was the healthcare certification. And why did I do that? Because I literally spent the previous 24 months in that headspace, right? And so I had the job experience, but then the certifications became the icing on the cake because now I had the certifications to validate the experience that I had demonstrated for 24 months. Okay.
Yep.
So, from an application standpoint, let's say you want to be a pen tester. That's fantastic, right? Maybe you start off as an analyst in the SOC, and maybe you start to shadow the malware team or the pen testing team, and you do some stretch assignments, or you get involved as a support, in a support role on a larger project. You use that to build your resume. At the same time, take your CEH, right? Like build those two pathways together, because much in the same way that I experienced my journey, those certifications reinforced my job experience and made me much more marketable for the next role. Because when I went to my next opportunity, I literally told my story from the narrative that I just shared with you. I explained to them my experience in healthcare. I explained to them the challenges that I faced and what I did to overcome those challenges. And then I capped it by saying, and in addition to that, I achieved the following certifications, right, that show my experience had been validated by trusted parties, right, by ISC Squared, by ISACA, right? And so that's my advice, right? Make your own choices in your own journey. But I've always seen certifications as an opportunity to demonstrate real world experience.
No, I like the answer. I like
Mhm.
especially real, and I think I'll add the caveat and have room for discussion on this one. Do you believe real world experience has to come from on the job, or would you be okay with certification validating project experience?
Yeah, I think it's both, right? And I would never suggest that there's only one path, because I've advised students who have done the same thing through internships, right, or through other shadowing type things. And this is the other way I think about it. And I shared this actually at the conference. Always be willing to step outside of your existing role, especially if you do have a role in a corporate environment where there are other teams. Don't be afraid to ask questions of your peer teams. Even for me now, I look for stretch opportunities in that way, but I also look for those opportunities that are more like, industry focused, right? Special projects, whether it be through, standards organizations, right? Like wherever you can gain that experience, go get it, right? It's not exclusive to your 9 to 5 job, right? If there are um, peers that are working on something, a project that may be even an open source project or a project you can contribute to in some way, by all means, gain access to the communities where you can get exposure and experience. Don't limit it to your 9 to 5. That's the
Mm-hmm.
message.
It's especially splitting your time up. At least 2 hours of your work week should always be spent learning something new.
That's right. I agree with that, and I believe wholeheartedly that continuous education, continuous development of your skills is critically important to stay relevant in this business. Even once you
Oh,
get that job, like you still got to stay on it, man.
no, I wholeheartedly
Yeah.
agree. I cannot tell
Oh
you
yeah.
how many times I moonlight
That's
to the
right.
point, especially with GCP going out yesterday.
Oh yeah.
It was a company holiday for most of us. It was GCP going out. I cannot tell you yesterday I was CS, I was web designer, I was like
Doing
banners
all
up.
of it.
Yep. I'm like
Yeah.
status pages to re-edit, especially Cloudflare. I
That's
did not
right.
expect Cloudflare to back down either, but neither
Yeah,
here nor
Cloudflare had some issues too. Yeah.
yeah. I'm like, let me not compare it. Let me not compare our stacks on the
Yeah.
live
Yeah.
call. I'll take you out for a whiskey for that one for later.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey,
I'll,
before you go to the next question, I want to build on that because that's a good point, right? I think back a lot on previous roles that I've had and how the skills that I've acquired along the way still add value for me now, right? And you mentioned, having to quickly pivot and put your web hat on and building static pages, right? It never fails that I enter into a role. I'll give you one example, and I'll kind of redact some of this because I'm not speaking officially for my company. But the first role I had, um, I was presented an interesting challenge because it had absolutely nothing to do with the job description, right? My manager came in and said, "Hey, um, we need to migrate a SharePoint server."
oh,
And he said, "I know you've had some experience as an IIS administrator and Windows administrator. Did you ever have to run SharePoint servers?" And I said, "Well, funny you should mention that. Yes, I did have to run a SharePoint farm." And basically, I ended up taking ownership of a project to migrate a series of a fleet of SharePoint servers, and I hadn't touched that in probably 6 years or so, but I still had the core knowledge. And my point in illustrating that is in this business, think about transferable skills, but also remember that things that are in your toolbox, they're there for a reason. And you never know when you may have to dust it off, right? Even for me, I'm not, actively developing software, but I still use my coding skills. I still use my Python skills, right? I still, kind of keep those things handy because you never know when you need them. And I'll say this one last thing: learn what you can and think about your skills as a utility belt, right? That you have, hammer, screwdriver, pliers, right? You have these things and they stay with you and keep them sharp because you just never know when you need to bring one of them out and it actually becomes the right tool at the right time.
yep. I I sorry, English is hard today. I agree with you
Okay.
wholeheartedly on that part because
Yeah,
yeah, you will be surprised. I haven't been project management, event management, everything. You'll be surprised at how many transferable skills enter incident response.
yep,
Because at the end of the day, it's all about risk management, how fast you can close, how fast you can get to RTO, and how fast you can wrap it back up to normal operations.
that's right.
Um, yep. Um, I'm trying to think about what else I want to go. Let's see where I want to take this next. I would say since we've talked about incident response, let's open that door and go a little more
Mhm.
uh into what are some hands-on technical skills that you see folks needing to develop or not coming into market with anymore, or what might be lacking as an industry as a whole when it comes to cybersecurity. I'm avoiding trying to be very specific in order to make
Mhm.
sure I
Of
don't break an NDA with Bank of America, but more of like,
course.
what are you expecting people to come in with that they may not be coming in with?
Yeah, I mean, listen, that's a great question, and that's definitely focused on kind of the workforce development side of the house. So a couple of things, right? I'll tell you, as a hiring manager and someone who's had to lead teams, one of the things that I am seeing a pattern of are sort of folks not realizing that the basics of technology infrastructure are still relevant. Case in point, right? Cloud is huge, right? There are a lot of folks that say, "Hey, I want to be a cloud engineer. I want to, be a cloud architect." Well, you still got to know how the OSI model works, right? You still got to know layer 3. You got to know TCP/IP. You got to know how IP addressing works. Like the fundamentals still matter.
It's like,
Um,
and
a lot of
everything.
folks, yeah, like and there's nothing wrong with wanting to achieve something, but take the time to learn the fundamentals as well, right? And that's something that I'm seeing kind of a pattern of as of late is folks coming into the space, and maybe they are coming from a different industry or a different career, but they haven't necessarily built up the level of competency in the basics. And so when certain things happen, and you mentioned, kind of the incident space, right? There's a level of knowledge and skill that needs to be sort of a baseline level so you can actually understand what you're seeing in Splunk or what you're seeing in the dashboard. Like
Oh yeah.
even before you escalate, right? Like your notes need to be reflective that in a way of the technological, you know, activities that have happened. So the incident commander or the person who you're escalating to can understand what you're communicating. And so that's one thing that I would definitely emphasize to the audience here is don't sleep on the fundamentals. Like make sure that you know those things very well. The second thing that I'll sort of address is, you know, what I would call an intangible aspect of what I look for or what I'm seeing kind of missing. And that's around just a level of ruggedness. That's a term I use a lot, or resilience, because the work is hard, right? There's sort of this conception
You gotta
sometimes
tell
that,
me twice.
yeah, like I'm just gonna, get this six-figure job and I'm not gonna have to really like pay my dues. I'm not gonna have to work, on 12-hour rotation. Like, and it's like, hey, like, are people saying, hey, look, I've had 1 year experience, now put me in a management role, put me in an executive role. It's like, okay, there's still a pathway, right? And so what I would suggest as counsel and advice is be willing to trust the process and allow yourself time to learn and mature. And I would also say, you know, as you are looking for roles, be teachable, be coachable, allow yourself space to make mistakes, and that's okay because we all do, but try to fail forward and bounce back quickly. Be willing to admit when there's something you don't know, because this business will test you, and you don't want to be the person that presents a false representation. It's okay to not know everything. That's okay. You don't have to go into your first cyber role, as a person that tries to know it all. But be willing to learn. Be willing to raise your hand and ask questions. Be willing to help others. That's also something that I think is really important if you want to have a successful career in this business.
I agree, especially with OSI level.
Oh yeah,
That you can never run away from OSI, y'all.
you
It will
cannot.
life, death, taxes, and OSI
That's
because
right.
in a similar situation, I had to make the call because when you're incident commander, the buck stops at you and you
Right.
are liable for everything. It was, are we going at the application layer? Or are we going at the network layer? And where do we want to
That's
start
right.
the cut and what threshold? And I'm like, well, I'm going to cut the cake this way and I'm going to pray it works.
That's right. Fingers crossed. Yeah.
Finger crossed and make sure that latency does not kill me. Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
I will say I'm looking at this next too because OSI is. I agree with you there. I think OSI and some basics need to come through, and you have what I've seen in the market as well as lately with applicants. I'm getting folks who want executive level management positions right out the
Mhm.
gate from only having theoretical. And I love what you said was applied, like especially an
Yeah.
applied security program in your academic teaching, because I have folks who have had their masters or MBAs come and say, I am ready for a cybersecurity role. I'm like, you come as a CISSP, but have you done a round robin? Do you know what a SOC looks like? Do you know what a
Right.
NOC looks like? Are you able to understand where these roles, and if you're coming in, especially at a startup level, where I'm on the opposite end of you, you're an established corp, I'm at the, we're all in this together, and I'm gonna need somebody to
Hmm.
very much like we can augment our skills with AI as much as we want, but unless you understand that, hey, this is not gonna connect well or this is gonna cause something, we are gonna have
That's right.
issues.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Totally agree. Yep. Yep.
Let's move into industry as a whole, I'll say,
Okay.
where you've mentioned that cloud is evolving. I'm ironically seeing folks start spending on on-prem again because cloud costs are
Yep.
increasing.
They are increasing. Yep. Especially when you want to run AI in the cloud with all the compute.
I laugh because there's a GeekWire article about a startup that is being made fun of for buying 1,000 NVIDIA graphic cards. I'm like, well, we know what they're doing.
Exactly.
You're not much in stealth mode anymore. Oh. how do you feel that cloud security is evolving, especially as we're seeing that incidents such as GCP's outage and AWS outage are becoming more frequent?
Yeah.
What you've kind of mentioned that students should be learning their basics and preparing. Do you have any
Mhm.
specific call outs for something with cloud security? Like, should they be preparing for more CASB skills, more Splunk, or not to insert name product here, but
Mhm.
similar? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I believe there's a couple of drivers for both adoption and regression in that space. We just sort of tiptoed on into that, just the cost of services, but also the cloud attack surface, right? Like the fact that you put workloads, in another person's environment, and the threat actors know that too. Like that's the thing. It's like it's not like you're just doing that in secret, right? Like there's more from an enumeration standpoint, and it's like I told my students this past semester. I was like, think of the cloud as this massive apartment building, right? And some clouds are more like slumlords in the Bronx in the 1980s, and some are a little more upscale, but it's still a shared space, right? But that attack surface is massive because not only the infrastructure and the tools that are leveraged, the cloud providers themselves tell you up front, right? We are responsible for security of the cloud, but you're responsible for security in the cloud, meaning we'll give you the key to the front door, but what you do in that apartment of yours,
That's
it's your
yours.
business, right?
Yup.
It's your business. Additionally, the public cloud it is exactly that. It's like this massive housing project in many ways because there are so many cloud instances, and I won't speak of which vendor I'm talking about specifically, that are just orphaned instances, right?
Oh, I know what you're
And
talking
and
about.
and the threat actors are kind of squatting and hanging out in these empty apartments. Basically, that's the analogy I'll use. So um, that scenario that I just described is wrought with risk, right? If you're thinking about a large Fortune 500 company or a large financial institution, right? You got to think twice about, hey, do I really want to have my apartment next to, the trap house? Like, do I really,
Yeah.
do I really want,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, right? As much as the cloud provider may provide me all these assurances and SOC 2 reports, at the end of the day, we've already seen instances in which traversal of tenancy or denial of service and other types of attacks, are causing real threats to cloud infrastructure. And so, to that end, yeah, a lot of companies are reevaluating their cloud strategy, and some are moving back to a more hybrid native approach where, they will use cloud for lower risk workloads, or they will just use cloud infrastructure for burst compute. But it is not. I think there's a realization that a 100% cloud environment is just not within the risk appetite of certain industries. There are some industries that, yes, 100% cloud, they're fine with that. But when you're talking about, in my case, I work in financial services, which is considered a national security asset and a global financial infrastructure, there are dire consequences if, um, you know, cloud
Oh,
does
yeah.
not work,
Plug in
right?
InfraGard right
Money
here.
stops moving.
International.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk to your local state InfraGard. This is a great ad for this
Yeah,
part.
exactly. Yeah. So I think, to answer your question succinctly, um, this is kind of indicative of why I said earlier, still stay with the fundamentals. Yes, you need to learn cloud because it's not going anywhere, but I don't think at the same time companies are ready to continue a very aggressive approach with deployment of cloud and doing that in a way that doesn't allow them the ability to fall back to on-prem if they need to.
Yes,
This is a
I
very
agree.
interesting topic. Yeah.
Oh, trust. This is going to be a fun one as we see the balance, especially under the way I've seen it in similar, we're both finance. I've seen companies use it, switch data locations quickly via
Hmm.
cloud, only to
Right.
avoid regulations,
Yes.
and be able to do that. I think that would be my one like little caveat for the students as well that are watching at home. When Ted is referencing like you want to live next to the trap house, I was saying this is where the peak as a service reference makes very well sense of how much where is your shared responsibility between you and the vendor,
That's
And
right.
what do you want to own? Like, if I'm just providing the conversation and the toppings, cool. If I need to move out, I'm quick. But if I own
Right.
the full infrastructure, moving is the hardest part with your homemade pizza versus going to a restaurant and just having to show up.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh,
And there's cost, right? I mean, the cost prohibitive nature as well. I think a lot of the cloud vendors are changing um, their approach to how they implement pricing, right? So that they remain in business and that variable costs. And if you aren't able to properly govern the utilization of cloud, that's where I've also seen some challenges where companies have made a very aggressive shift to the cloud, but they didn't have the proper governance around the number of virtual machines they would allow to be used or the number of API requests and they say, oh, okay, last quarter it only cost us $500,000, and they look up this quarter and it's like, oh, we're at 2 mil. How did that happen? Oh my God, like we didn't budget for this, right? Like,
really. Set
yeah,
your billing alarms. Let this be a reminder no
billing
matter what
alarms.
platform you're in. Billing
Yes,
alarms will be the first alert. You can put as much Splunk, as much as Hotel you
hmm
want, but you know who's going to be accurate with that bill? The vendor.
that's right.
Trust me.
And they're going to
Um,
come for their money.
oh, they will.
That's
My
right.
first AWS project ran me 1G because I did not set up proper
There you
implementation.
go. So
Oh,
Alejandro, you've experienced that firsthand. So
I have. That's
that's
trust
right.
me. I'm an on-prem man. I think I will be an on-prem man until I die now. But
Uh-huh.
nothing hurts you. Nothing hurts if you set up your local Proxmart and run your own VMs.
That's right. Yep. I mean, I will attest to that. I still have my VMware stack, my home lab, and I still fire it up from time to time. It still works. And the nice thing about it too is, you can sort of, I mean, yeah, there's the portability and the reusability of cloud. I think is still a selling point, right? So I'll give you an example. Let's say you have on-prem, or you want to expand into a new market globally, right? Maybe you don't have the resources to build a data center, or you don't want to do the whole colo. You can do like, some, you know, small deployments, right, to test that market. And there's a relatively low entry cost. And so let's say, you do a POC for 6 months, you say, hey, it's not working. You can collapse that very quickly, right? Versus trying to, you know, tear down a data center so I think there's pros and cons, right? Companies will still use cloud for certain use cases. I think we're just refining what those look like based on risk appetites. Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
And
Great question.
since since you told us about your home lab, what are you? I'm littered with Optiplexes. The kids know that I recommend surplus.gov all the time. I'm like, buy yourself a rack
Yeah.
of, yeah, get a
Yeah.
pallet of Optiplexes, pull the hard drives, because I think nothing creates a better person to learn the basics than when you have to work with outdated computers.
I agree.
Uh, so talk to me about that. Let's talk your home lab. What are you running
Yeah,
network stack?
man.
Whatever you
Let's
want to
let's
share. Are you Ubiquity
yeah, let's
man? Are
geek
you
out.
Hero man?
Yeah, so I followed the same course, right? I got most of my gear from tech surplus shops around the Dallas Fort Worth area because we got a lot of tech here, tons of colos and data centers, and so it's very common when companies do refreshes, they'll basically write off all that old gear and they'll send it to a tech surpluser, right? And so you can went in there. And I used to have a bunch of Dell stuff. I got rid of that, and I switched out actually to some IBM servers. But I've always been a VMware guy, and when I was in infrastructure, I was a VCP, and so I ran, vCenter and all that fun stuff. So I've got, a
Trigger
couple
warning.
of yeah, I used to have a Blade, but now I've just got a stack of servers, and basically I run my domain controller. I have two domain controller VMs. I've got Nessus scanner for vuln stuff because I like to stay up on that and play around with different things, and I've got some forensics tools, and I use that also to do different sort of cyber range type activities, and so. I've got, what I would consider to be a small office, like it'd be kind of like a remote office stack, with, a couple of domain controllers, some Windows servers, print server, file server, that type of thing. And then, I have a lamp stack just for web stuff. But ultimately, what I like to do is, I like to simulate, especially when I was in grad school, my pen testing course allowed me to do a lot of those exercises in my home lab, which is great. Um, and then, from a storage standpoint, the Synology boxes have always been sort of my go-to for just throwing up storage quickly and
Yeah.
being able to basically, have like a storage area network, a small one. And then I've got another older iOmega device that I use for it's basically tied to the vCenter host, and it allows me to have like all of my images and things from my VMs kind of partitioned and set up in that way. So, but yeah, point here is, experiment, right? Like, don't be afraid to build things at home. The nice thing is you can do it in a pretty contained environment, and you won't break the internet. Like,
Oh,
just
oh,
break your own stuff and learn along the way. So
you get a local host error and you call it a day. Just make sure whatever you do, you put it behind a firewall. That's
put
all
it
I
behind a
always say.
firewall. That's
Put it behind
right.
a firewall.
Segment. Absolutely, properly
Yep.
segment. And that's the other thing, man. The beauty of this is learning basic networking happens for me. It happened in a home lab environment, right? I was able to just, when I actually worked in infrastructure, I had access to tons of switches, old ones that we were discarding, and so learning how to configure those and how to manage those, that was really foundational for me, and it's still definitely a part of the game.
Oh,
So don't
always.
be afraid to get your hands on hardware.
And for those of you that don't, or like their hardware's a barrier, Cisco Packet Tracer is free, and that's where
Yeah,
I
free.
learned. I did virtual packet tracer with that. That software might be 20 years old, but you know what it does do? Simulate a network.
That's
it,
right.
it
That's
does it
exactly
well.
right.
I'm not the
Yeah.
best iOS coder, but I can at least be like, okay, why is this failing? And even nowadays,
Mhm.
when sometimes I'm doing some cloud stuff, I'll simulate what I would have done in Cisco was on-prem with what I set up in the cloud, and I try to reconcile the Terraform differences, and I look and I'm like, okay, I think my issue is probably here.
Mhm.
But that's OSI level. Wait, let me not quote the wrong layer, but it's a network layer, and go from
Network
there.
layer. Hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I want to be mindful of time, Ted, as we got 8 minutes left.
Mhm.
Is there anything you want to shout out to the students specifically, or you want them, if you had to leave one parting piece of advice, or even myself too? I appreciate your advice.
Yeah.
I always think you're in another life. We're best friends. And
Yeah.
then, especially with a home lab like that, other than the IBM, I can't. I appreciate. I sold my soul to Dell a long time ago.
That's funny. Yeah, yeah, no, all good. So I'll give you one tech tip, and I'll kind of wrap it up with some closing thoughts. In the spirit of what we're talking about in terms of like, building a home lab or problem solving, one of the things that I've started to do is leverage some AI, right? Because the beauty of this season and where we are in tech is, we have so much knowledge at our fingertips, and so if there's something that you don't know, I mean, ask ChatGPT. Like, okay, like I want to design a network that looks like this. ChatGPT will give you different options, right? And you can play around with that. Even in terms of like coding, one of the things that I do, I leverage Collab on Google. That's my primary coding environment for Python. And a couple of months back, I was in an AI class for financial services, and we were building um, market optimization models, right? So portfolio optimization models, which I'm not a finance person, but I need to know how that works because I work in an institution that does that type of stuff. And so one of the things we're concerned about are emerging threats around AI models, right? Like AI poisoning, right? Other types of novel attacks that we're starting to see kind of raise their head. And so I use Gemini and Collab, and that's my environment to code. And so embrace that, right? I mean, obviously there are certain risks, but the takeaway here is you have companions in these AI tools that can help you accelerate your knowledge, right?
Mhm.
If there are things that you don't necessarily know, man, you have some powerful tools at your fingertips to help you fill in those gaps. And so I want to definitely encourage you guys to do that. And then the final thing I'll share as we kind of wrap up is take advantage of this community. I will tell you, the MIC community, my goodness, it's an amazing uh, just a group of people, but first and foremost, the mission and the reason why Mary and the team are here is for your benefit, right? For your growth and development. And so, embrace that opportunity, take full advantage of it. Don't leave anything off the table, right? Go to the sessions, engage, ask questions, and just really lock in because this type of experience is truly invaluable, right? It accelerates your ability to understand how to be successful in this space, and it gives you access and exposure to people that can really, really come alongside you and mentor you. And so, I'll kind of end with that. But I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be here today with you all. Shout out to Alejandro, Ralph, Mary, the whole team. Love you all. I look forward to continued opportunities to join in these types of webinars. And yeah, really grateful.
Always, we love you back, Ted, and it goes with all our mentors too. We look forward to having a special mentoring session this next upcoming season with our next apprentices, and
Yeah.
we'll wrap. Those are kind words. I don't think I could have said it better myself. And then for the students who I will say I agree with Ted and use AI for everything, not for
AI is your
management.
friend.
AI is to an extent.
Except don't write malware with it. All right. Don't use the right malware unless you're a
Uh,
malware engineer.
Let me delete my GitHub real quick,
That's
and
right.
I will
Delete the
talk to you.
GitHub.
Okay, and then
Yeah.
let me. I'll give me 2 seconds to cut, and we are. Oh, let me go.